James tucked the secure phone into his pocket and ascended the reinforced stairs back to his kitchen. Through the window, he spotted Marilyn Caldwell power walking past his house for the third time that morning, her designer tracksuit an incongruous match for the intensity of her surveillance. She slowed conspicuously, pretending to adjust her fitness tracker while angling her phone toward his property. "Amateur hour," James muttered, deliberately turning on his sprinklers. The sudden spray sent Marilyn scurrying with an indignant yelp, providing him a moment of petty satisfaction. The doorbell rang precisely at noon. James checked the security feed. Eleanor Wilson stood on his porch, her silver hair neatly coiffed, clutching a casserole dish. The thermal scan showed no weapons, no electronic devices beyond her medical alert pendant. He opened the door. "Mrs. Wilson," he nodded politely. "Commander," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tuna casserole. My Harold's favorite when he returned from business trips." James accepted the dish with a carefully neutral expression. Mrs. Wilson had never before acknowledged any awareness of his background. In 22 years of operations, he'd developed an instinct for identifying fellow intelligence professionals. Eleanor Wilson set off every internal alarm. "Perhaps you'd like to come in for coffee," he offered, the invitation itself a test. Eleanor smiled knowingly. "No need. Just wanted to warn you that our new HOA president has been inquiring about property records. Specifically, about basement permits." She patted his arm with surprising strength. "Your service is appreciated, Commander. Some of us still remember what vigilance requires." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away with remarkable steadiness for her age. James closed the door, immediately running the casserole dish through his portable scanner. Clean, no surveillance devices, no chemical agents. Just tuna casserole, made with the precision of someone accustomed to following protocols. "Curiouser and curiouser," he murmured. The afternoon passed with methodical preparations for the night's delivery. James reviewed schematics for the new air filtration components, verified the maintenance access points, and ran a comprehensive security sweep. 3 neighborhood children retrieved an errant baseball from his front yard, scampering away with wide-eyed glances when he nodded in acknowledgement. "The Ghost," they called him in whispers. If only they knew how accurate the nickname was. At dusk, his television and selected lights activated on automated timers, maintaining the appearance of ordinary domestic activities. James slipped out through his garage, using the service tunnel that connected to the storm drainage system. Half a mile away, he emerged from a maintenance hatch, retrieved his secondary vehicle, and drove to the designated meeting point. The handoff occurred without incident. An unmarked van, 2 operatives he recognized from previous exchanges, and 4 reinforced crates transferred quickly into his vehicle. Their contents would ensure the shelter remained at operational readiness for the scenarios none of his neighbors could comprehend, except, perhaps, Eleanor Wilson. As he navigated back through the darkened suburban streets, James noted a black SUV parked near the entrance to his subdivision. A figure sat behind the wheel, illuminated briefly by the glow of a cell phone. The vehicle hadn't been there earlier. James committed the license plate to memory, DXC4729, and made a mental note to run it through secure channels tomorrow. The quiet life he'd envisioned in retirement continued to elude him. The weight of responsibility never lightened, not really. Tomorrow, he would need to assess this new potential threat, determine Eleanor Wilson's actual knowledge and affiliations, and prepare countermeasures for Marilyn Caldwell's escalating interest in his property. For tonight, though, his priority was securing the delivery and updating the command center with confirmation of receipt. The bunker, officially designated Federal Emergency Response Shelter Northeast 177, remained his primary mission. And James Coast Reeves had never failed a mission yet. The elementary school gymnasium hummed with nervous energy as neighbors whispered among themselves, stealing glances at the federal agents stationed at each exit. The air conditioning strained against the unusual gathering, pushing cool air that did little to alleviate the tension. Extremist organizations. Thomas Larkin, a software engineer from Maple Street, raised his hand. "Are we in danger? Should we evacuate?" Director Wilson held up a reassuring hand. There's no immediate threat to residents. The operation tonight neutralized the primary security concern. His gaze swept across the assembled community members. What you've experienced over the past 6 months, the excessive rule enforcement, invasive surveillance, targeting of specific properties, was part of a systematic intelligence gathering operation. A projection screen descended from the ceiling, displaying a map of the United States with dozens of red pins marking locations. Sovereign Communities presents itself as a homeowner advocacy group, Agent Harmon explained, stepping forward. In reality, it's a domestic extremist organization that infiltrates suburban neighborhoods through HOA leadership positions. Their purpose is to identify and map government facilities, particularly those disguised as ordinary residences. Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. On the screen, footage played showing Bradley and 2 other enforcement officers photographing the electrical meters at the Patel residence. "Why target our neighborhood specifically?" asked Linda Chen, clutching her husband's hand. Director Wilson nodded to James, who stepped forward. The room quieted immediately, residents seeing their neighbor in an entirely new light. Clear Creek Estates was designed with specific features, James explained, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had always made neighbors instinctively step aside when he passed. The cul-de-sac layout provides limited access points. The underground water and power infrastructure is redundant. The elevation and proximity to transportation corridors make it strategically valuable. He gestured to the screen, which now displayed a topographical map of the area. This community was developed in 1983 as part of the Federal Continuity of Government program. It's not the only one, but it's among the most important due to its proximity to D.C. Eleanor Wilson rose shakily from her seat, supported by a young agent. "My husband, Harold, was part of the original planning committee. Several homes in this neighborhood have special modifications, reinforced structures, independent power systems, secure communications, mine included." A collective intake of breath swept through the room as residents mentally catalogued the odd neighbors who kept to themselves, the houses with subtle security features, the residents whose professions were vaguely described as government work. "So this whole time," Frank Dawson looked stricken, "when I was reporting violations for Ms. Caldwell, you were unwittingly helping map federal assets," Director Wilson confirmed. The violations themselves were pretexts to gain access to properties of interest. The screen changed to show Marilyn's home office, photographed during that evening's raid. Wall maps covered with notes, computer equipment for analyzing energy usage patterns, and books on infrastructure assessment lay spread across her desk. "What's going to happen now?" someone called out. Director Wilson straightened his tie. "Ms. Caldwell and her associates will face federal charges. As for this community," he paused, "we have a unique situation. The traditional protocol would be to relocate all federal assets and personnel." A protest rose from several residents who had just realized they might lose their homes. However, the director continued, "Given the extraordinary circumstances and the fact that operational security has already been compromised, we're considering an alternative approach, one that has never been implemented before." James stepped forward again, scanning the faces of neighbors he had deliberately kept at arm's length for years. Instead of abandonment, integration. Instead of dispersion, concentration of resources. "What does that mean in plain English?" Thomas Larkin asked. "It means," Eleanor Wilson answered before anyone else could, "they're considering letting us stay, all of us, and bringing us into the fold." As the sky darkened and the neighborhood's new security lights cast geometric patterns across lawns, James led his small group from the porch to his backyard. Eleanor, Sergeant Jackson, the Chen family, and Thomas Larkin followed him to a seemingly ordinary garden shed. "I haven't shown this to anyone outside federal service," James said, placing his palm against what appeared to be a normal wooden panel. A soft blue light scanned his hand, and the back wall of the shed silently receded, revealing a brushed steel elevator. The secondary entrance, Eleanor nodded in approval. Harold mentioned these were being designed before he passed. The group descended 40 feet below the surface, emerging into a command center that hummed with technology far beyond civilian standard. Wall screens displayed security feeds from throughout the neighborhood, now with residents' informed consent, while a central holographic projection showed a three-dimensional map of Clear Creek estates, with pulsing indicators representing active security personnel. "This is the neighborhood coordination hub," James explained. "There are 5 others positioned strategically throughout the community, though this is the primary facility." Linda Chen, who had revealed her background as a DRPA cybersecurity specialist once clearances were established, examined the systems with professional appreciation. "The integration is seamless. I would never have detected these surveillance capabilities, even with my training." "That was the point," James replied. "Separate but parallel infrastructure. The water you drink, the power you use, the internet you access, all of it designed to appear standard while providing redundant systems that could operate independently if necessary." Thomas Larkin, whose software engineering skills had earned him immediate recruitment to the technical team, studied the neighborhood map. "So all this time, we've been living in a government installation disguised as a suburb?" "More accurately," Eleanor interjected, settling into an ergonomic chair that seemed designed for her small frame. "You've been living in a suburb that was designed to protect and support government installations. The distinction matters. This was never about controlling civilians, but about creating resilient communities that could function during crisis scenarios." James nodded. "The Ghost Integration Protocol takes that original concept further. Instead of federal agencies retreating behind walls, we create partnerships with the communities we serve." "And Resilience Day is what? Our cover story?" Jackson asked, his Marine training evident in his direct questioning. "It's not a cover story," James corrected. "It's the public-facing component of a classified program. The community celebrates resilience and preparedness without knowing all the details. The classified components remain protected, but the practical benefits, emergency medical training, disaster response coordination, enhanced security, those are real and tangible for everyone." Outside, through the security feeds, they could see children playing a new game that had emerged since the incident: Agents and Operators, a complex version of hide and seek that incorporated elements of surveillance awareness and communication security, taught playfully by off-duty personnel. "They're learning tradcraft through play," Eleanor observed with a smile. "Harold would have loved that." James checked his watch, an ordinary-looking timepiece that connected to 7 different secure networks. "The Secretary's helicopter lands in 20 minutes. The full cabinet briefing on the Ghost Integration Protocol begins at 2100 hours. As civilian liaisons, you'll be expected to present your components of the community response plan." "Are we ready for this?" Linda asked, suddenly nervous. "To be the model for a whole new approach to national security." James looked around at these people he had once avoided, now essential partners in something unprecedented. The weight of responsibility remained, but it was shared now, distributed among those who had chosen to be part of something larger than themselves. "We've already proven we can handle a crisis together," he said simply. "Everything else is just details." Above them, Clear Creek Estates continued its evening routines. Dinner preparations, homework assistance, dog walking, the ordinary rhythms of suburban life. But beneath the surface, both literally and figuratively, something extraordinary had taken root. A community that had transformed from unwitting neighbors to essential allies in a new vision of collective security. As the community center emptied, Marilyn remained behind with Bradley and her 2 most loyal board members. Frank Dawson, a retired insurance adjuster with a pathological need for approval, and Cecilia Mercer, whose resentment toward her neighbors had festered since her Garden Gnome collection was mocked in the community newsletter 3 years prior. "I want hourly surveillance rotations past the Reeves property," Marilyn instructed, unfolding a detailed map of the neighborhood across the conference table. Red circles marked homes with violations, while yellow highlighted properties under investigation. James's home was the only one marked in ominous black. "What exactly are we looking for?" Frank asked, adjusting his glasses nervously. "Patterns," Marilyn replied, opening her laptop to display a spreadsheet. For 3 months, I've documented every visitor, every delivery, every departure. He receives unmarked packages approximately every 16 days. His power consumption spikes between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock a.m. on alternating Tuesdays. And last month, during the thunderstorm, his was the only house that maintained power when the entire block went dark. Brady leaned forward, eagerness evident in his posture. My buddy at the sheriff's office ran his plates. The vehicle registration links to a shell company in Delaware. There's more, Marilyn continued, lowering her voice despite the empty room. I hired a private investigator who specializes in military records. Our Mr. Reeves isn't just any retired Navy man. He was with SEAL Team 6, counterterrorism operations. The kind of work that doesn't make it into public records. Cecilia's eyes widened. You think he's running some kind of operation from our neighborhood? Should we contact the authorities? Marilyn's laugh was brittle. And tell them what? That a decorated war hero has suspicious power consumption patterns? No, we handle this ourselves. The HOA covenant gives us the right to inspect properties when there's evidence of unauthorized modifications. Section 14, paragraph C. But if he refuses? Frank asked. Bradley patted the taser concealed beneath his jacket. That's why Mom put me in charge of enforcement. I know how to handle uncooperative individuals. Outside in the parking lot, Eleanor Wilson sat in her modest sedan, her hearing aid modified decades ago to serve a purpose beyond amplifying conversation. The directional microphone had picked up every word through the community center's thin walls. She started her car and drove slowly past James's house, noting that his curtains were drawn, unusual for this time of evening. The neighborhood had changed since she and Harold first moved in 40 years ago. Back then, it had been filled with mid-level government employees, people who understood discretion and shared an unspoken code about respecting boundaries. Now it was dominated by newcomers like Marilyn, people who mistook authority for power and rules for purpose. Eleanor parked in her driveway and retrieved her encrypted tablet from beneath the passenger seat. Harold might be gone, but his connections remained active. She typed a brief message. Nesty 177 COMPROMISED. Hostile civilian interior east. Recommend COUNTR me as yours. The response came within minutes. Akanan OVLETD. Assets NOTIFID. Maintain distance. Eleanor sighed, watching as Bradley's oversized pickup truck cruised slowly past James's property. The young man's face was illuminated by his dashboard lights, his expression far too eager. This would not end well. Across the street, Marilyn Caldwell stood at her second-floor window, binoculars trained on James's darkened house. Her obsession had moved beyond mere HOA officiousness into something darker. The folder beside her contained property records, satellite images, and electrical grid schematics, information no homeowner should possess. In the shadows of her office, a framed certificate hung partially obscure behind her law degree. Sovereign Communities Leadership Program, Class of 2021. Below it, rendered in Fox medieval script, the organization's motto, Reclaiming America, one neighborhood at a time. Federal agents are en route, James informed Bradley quietly, rain streaming down both their faces. Release pressure on your shoulder joint, and I'll allow you to sit up. You're bluffing, Bradley sputtered, though uncertainty crept into his voice. This is HOA jurisdiction. You're just some washed-up soldier who... His words dissolved into a gasp as James applied precise pressure to the nerve cluster beneath his collarbone. 3 facts, James stated calmly. First, I'm not a soldier. SEALs are sailors. Second, you're currently immobilized in a Ukrainian submission hold that wasn't taught to me by the Navy. And third, you've just committed at least 4 federal offenses, including impersonating law enforcement on government property. With practiced efficiency, James zip-tied Bradley's wrists using a restraint pulled from his boot. The other 2 enforcement officers remained where they had fallen, one nursing a sprained wrist, the other still trying to comprehend how James had moved through space so quickly. Headlights swept across the scene as two more vehicles pulled up, Marilyn's luxury SUV and Frank Dawson's sensible sedan. Neighbors had begun to emerge onto their porches, despite the downpour, cell phones recording the unfolding drama. "What is the meaning of this?" Marilyn demanded, storming forward with an umbrella clutched like a weapon. "Bradley, are you hurt? This is assault. Frank, call the police immediately." James stood, his posture shifting subtly into parade rest, hands clasped behind his back. "Ms. Caldwell, your enforcement team attempted forced entry into a federal installation while impersonating law enforcement officers. I've detained them under the authority granted by U.S. Code Title 18, Section 1382. Marilyn's laugh was brittle with false confidence. "Federal installation? This is a residential property in Clear Creek Estates, subject to our HOA covenant, which you signed upon purchase." Actually, Eleanor Wilson's voice rang out as she approached, somehow having materialized at the edge of the gathering crowd. "He didn't sign anything of the sort." James maintained his neutral expression, though inwardly he reassessed the elderly woman yet again. Her timing was impeccable. "Of course he did," Marilyn snapped. "Every homeowner signs the covenant." Eleanor's smile was razor-thin. "I served on the board when Commander Reeves purchased this property. The paperwork you're thinking of bears my notary stamp, but not his signature, a clerical error that was never corrected." Frank Dawson fidgeted nervously, scrolling through his tablet. "She's right, Marilyn. I can't find his signed covenant in the digital archives." The wail of approaching sirens grew louder, and James noted the distinct pattern, not local police, but federal response units. His implant vibration confirmed, "HOA, inbound, 60 seconds. Marilyn's composure cracked slightly, but she rallied. "This changes nothing. Covenant or not, there are zoning regulations, building codes. Perhaps you should call your contact at Sovereign Communities," James interrupted, watching her face pale. "Gregory Whitman, isn't it? I believe his official title is Regional Coordinator for Infrastructure Assessment." The shock that flashed across Marilyn's features confirmed his intelligence was accurate. The rain seemed to intensify, pounding the pavement with renewed fury as the first unmarked federal vehicle turned onto Oakwood Drive. "How did you?" she began. "The same way I know about the 7 other neighborhoods where your organization has attempted to map federal installations," James replied. "The same way I know about the encrypted drives in your home office and the satellite imagery you purchased from a Russian commercial provider." Eleanor stepped closer to James, her frail appearance belied by the steel in her voice, as she addressed the stunned crowd. "Neighbors, please return to your homes immediately. What happens next is not for civilian eyes." As the federal vehicles deployed in textbook formation around the perimeter, James allowed himself the briefest moment of regret. His cover was blown. The bunker would likely be decommissioned, the equipment relocated, his mission here terminated. But as he caught Marilyn's expression, the dawning realization that she'd stumbled into something far beyond an HOA power play, he couldn't entirely suppress a flicker of satisfaction.